Hi everyone. Today I'm here to talk to you about FERPA and student data and how it relates to what you collect in your classroom and what you share with parents. So first off, what is FERPA? So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act that requires all schools that collect federal funding to protect the confidentiality of student education records and any personally identifiable information. So why do you need to know about FERPA? Well, first off, it applies to all public and charter schools. So that means that the school you work in needs to follow FERPA. And when you have knowledge about what the law is and what it protects, it helps you to ensure that you are being compliant with the law. It also helps to keep you informed about what is actually included in student records. You should be refreshed on FERPA laws on a yearly basis just to make sure that you maintain that compliance and that we make sure that all of our student education records are protected. So what is protected by FERPA? Well, school districts are required to maintain the confidentiality of all student personally identifiable information and their education records. So parents or students over the age 18 can request access to their records at any time. If at any time that they see that there is an error in the records or something they don't agree with, they can apply to have a hearing to have that error corrected as well. All of those things are all afforded to our families under FERPA. So what isn't protected by FERPA? Well, schools can disclose what they deem as directory information. So some things that would fall under that category are students' names, their addresses, their telephone number, and their email. So just like at the beginning of the school year when we're creating a student directory to share with families so they can connect outside of the school setting to set up play dates and things like that, we always give our parents an opportunity to opt out of that. That is something that FERPA asks that we do, is that even though we can share that information because it's not protected by FERPA, we should offer the parents an opportunity to opt out of that in case they don't want their child's information shared. They can also opt out of us sharing student information with military recruiters, and their students are always welcome to not take part in any surveys that are being offered by the district. Any notes that you as a teacher take about a student are also not protected by FERPA, and through a glitch in the law, homeschooled students are also not protected by FERPA as well. So what are some other exceptions? Well, if a student is over 18 but is still claimed by their parents on the tax return, then the parents can still have access to the records because that child is still viewed as one of their dependents. We can also share education records with other school officials that have a legitimate educational interest in the student. So if you are a special education teacher and you're working with a student, then that would be considered having a legitimate educational interest and you would be able to view their records. This can at times include a student resource officer that is working in the school as long as they have that legitimate educational interest. Schools also have to comply with any subpoenas or court orders that are presented to them. And if public safety is at risk and people's health and well-being is at risk, then we may also share education records in that case as well. FERPA does come with some shortcomings. The first one is that if a school were to break FERPA compliance, a family couldn't just couldn't sue the school themselves. They would have to go through the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, to file their complaint. After that complaint is filed, then it's kind of handled on a case-by-case basis, but just like anything, it takes a long time to go through. So they highly recommend that you exhaust all your options at the local level in your current school district before you file a complaint, because it will take a couple years before your complaint is handled. Um, another shortcoming is that the parents and students will carry the burden of needing to opt out. So if the parent misses the letter that goes home or an email that is telling them that they have that option to opt out, then their student would then continue to take part in either like the military recruitment or the directory information going home. So you just need to make sure that the parents have that opportunity and that they see the email, but that burden honestly falls to the parent. It also does not lay out a process for maintaining and destroying the educational records, and it also doesn't really lay out to a plan for how a parent could request that. That's all left up to the local level in your individual school districts. Much has changed over the last decade in how much surveillance is done within schools. And so most schools now have surveillance videos, and through that they are collecting videos and images of students. So there has been a debate over, is that considered an educational record? If it is collected by the school and maintained by the school, it is then considered an educational record. If you have an outside security company that is collecting the surveillance videos themselves, it's not considered an educational record. But once they turn it over to the school, then it becomes one. So it's a little tricky and there's a little glitch in that, but if it is turned over to the school and maintained by the school, it is then an educational record. So in that case, if it's an educational record, then parents do have access to it. However, if it's like a bus tape video, the school must take measures to make sure that they have either blocked out the faces of the other students who are on that bus video so that you can maintain the confidentiality the best you can of other students who are on that bus. So if a parent accesses it, you'll have to give yourself some time to make sure that you protect the other student's privacy the best way that you can. We also have to consider our students who are undocumented and how that goes with FERPA. So all educational agencies are required to provide all children equal access to public education, that their immigration status does not relate to whether or not they get to come to school. They get to come to school as long as they are a child living in America. So any practice that would discourage participation from students coming to school would go against a federal law. So that means that we do not have to turn over a student's immigration status over to ICE, and that student resource officers are not required to report undocumented students that are living in the United States. We would only have to do that if there were a court order or subpoena that was requiring us to do so. Now let's talk a little bit about our third-party vendors. So that would be something like we currently use Infinite Campus to house all of our student data and information, and that's where students are registered for school, and it holds all of their educational records. Infinite Campus would be considered a third-party vendor. They are required to protect the data as if they are our school district. So they need to follow all the confidentiality agreements that we do under FERPA as well. We should be leery of any free online vendors. So if it's a website that is offering a free service to your school district, most likely in order to maintain that freeness, they are selling data that they collect from the people who sign up to other companies to make money. So anytime that something's free, we should be really leery of using it because we are required under FERPA to keep our student data protected, and we can't guarantee that protection with a free online vendor, where with a third-party vendor like Infinite Campus, we have a contract with them that we know exactly how they're using our data, and we have a plan with them of how they will maintain that data, and that is all written out in a contract. Whereas if you're using a free online vendor, that's not the case often. We also need to consider how long are we going to store our data, and what's our plan for just destroying the data when it's no longer needed. So FERPA does not lay out any defined requirements for us, but we must protect that information from being disclosed without permission. So we need to make sure that our data is not accessible to anyone else and is in a safe place. We also need to make sure when it's time to destroy our data that when it is destroyed, that it's unreadable and irretrievable. So unreadable means like if it's a paper copy that other people can't get access to it easily, and irretrievable means that once we just can't just click delete, we need to make sure that it is permanently deleted off of our database and out of all of our third-party vendors. We, as a school district, should have a written plan in place for destruction, and we have to have that plan in our contract with our third-party vendors. So ours goes to the board office, and they keep the data for around 5 years, and then the records office has a plan for how they destroy it in their policies and procedures. So here are some tips for you as a teacher. You need to be super cautious of what technology you are using with your students. So if you are asking your students to sign up on a website or put in information on their on a website, you need to make sure that that website can maintain the confidentiality of the information that they are having the students put in. So it's best to kind of stick with what has been approved. So the apps that have been approved by our school district and the websites that we have approved for use. If you have a question about which ones that are approved, you should contact your administrator or Monica or Daniel, who are our technology coach and our technology tech, and they should be able to tell you which websites are safest and meet our confidentiality requirements. You also want to make sure that you are keeping all student data secure. This includes that when you leave your room, you don't want to leave Infinite Campus pulled up. You want to make sure you log out of it and log off of your desktop so that people cannot access the information that you have stored on your computer, and any records that you are keeping or that you have of students, you need to keep in a secure place. And you need to respond to any request that parents give you to access their educational records. You need to contact the school secretary and let them know about that request, so then they can make sure that the parents get the access that they need and that they are actually the people who are allowed to see those education records. Here are the resources I used for my presentation. Have a great day.